Well, a million times welcome, folks. A million times welcome. This is JWC Livestream. JWC Livestream. This is Sublimated Posey with David and Ricky. I am your host, Ricky. And David, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Welcome. It's a good thing, too. I've been having so much fun with these shows lately. And it's really, I doff my cap to you, sir. Your contributions are of high value. I've been creative lately, thankfully. Lots of writing. I can tell you that, like, for the last 2 weeks, I have not, like, every day it's been 1,000 words. Every day for the last 2 weeks, which to me is thank goodness, because there's nothing worse than having a stint where there's no output, or being too busy to write or too distracted to write. Fortunately, I've been able to keep it under control. I'm drawing to a close of this project that I've been working on, a sci-fi novel called Chiron 6. And I only have like maybe 8,000 words of it left. So totally thrilled. I forget when I started it. I want to say sometime maybe in the middle of summer or something like that. And there was a lot of sketchy points where I wasn't writing as much as I wanted to. Starting a book is always harder than the middle or the end, at least for me. Establishments and because if there's anything wrong, it can mess your whole continuity up. So I'm always more careful. But yeah, and outlining and doing stories, it's been marvelous. So in the grand scheme of things, I'm doing well. Soon the holidays will be upon us, and then they can go merrily on their way. How have you been, David? And how's your creativity going, brother?
I'm in good health, and the creativity is going very well. I'm writing a lot of poetry, and I'm working on a book called Athenaeum. It's going to change my life, I think, in a significant way.
That's the spirit. Yes, I agree, and I hope so faithfully that it will, and I believe it can. And it couldn't happen to a nicer person, honestly. So you've been throwing down on those atheist chapters, huh?
Yes, I have, and I'm at the chapter where our hero Jack is been captured by the atheist, and it's very different. This part of the book is very different from the rest of it because it's not fantasy. It's based in science and technology. So it's sort of taking the reader out of the fantasy, the high fantasy, and putting him into sort of a dystopia for a few chapters. And it's a very unpleasant experience, I should think. And that's why there's a much larger burden on responsibility on my part to write something that will meet the needs. It's a challenge, but it's a good challenge. I think every writer should write what they love, but then challenge themselves in some way.
No question. I mean, you have to emerge from your comfort zone periodically for the purposes of furthering process and education. Diversifying yourself too, so that you're not a one-trick pony, and it benefits the other stuff you do. So I couldn't agree more, David. So this is sort of a little holiday selection, I suppose. But these things are beloved texts of Western civilization. They help to lay the paving stones for our mythology, and in many cases, our dreams. They're psychic landscapes, as it were. Both of these have affected me. I mean, it's not like I sit there and read them every day, but they have left an impression, and they have shaped our culture and our collective unconsciousness when it comes to these subjects. Set aside the commercial drapings and applications and just focus on the beauty of language in this case, as I do. So this is a visit from St. Nicholas, Clement Clark Moore. And look when it was written, it's incredible, you know? So this may sound familiar. It was the night before Christmas when all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mama in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from the bed to see what was the matter. Way to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave the luster of midday to objects below. When, what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be Saint Nick. More rapid than eagles, his corsairs they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle mount to the sky, so up to the housetop the corsairs they flew, with the sleigh full of toys and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling, I heard on the roof prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard of his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his fingers beside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim ere he drove out of sight, Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night. I mean, look, man, you know, there's just something magical about how that is played, like the poetry of it, but just the concept, it paints the entire mythical picture of this Christmas event in all of its magic. And the language, in my opinion, it can't be denied. I mean, there's a reason it's a legend. There's a reason that how many times did you fall asleep with the words of this poem meandering through your mind? When I was a kid, I always fixated on the sugar plums, wondering what those must be like, because we didn't have sugar plums. We had lots of treats, don't get me wrong. I mean, look at me. But we didn't have sugar plums. So I always wondered what was sugar plums, and get my hands on some of them. But I mean, it's the blueprint for Christmas, for the gift-giving sensation of it, and for the concept of how the presents are brought by this mythical entity who is apparently a saint, who is also capable of wielding magic, it seems. From a world-building standpoint, this seems like a powerful entity, whatever he might be. He says a little spell and the reindeers take off. Apparently he can space fold down chimneys. Take notes, folks. I mean, this being's got the tricks, man. And there's no bail about him. He seems just there to do the gift, to be good. No harm. And he's loud enough where he announces himself, so it's not like he's sneaking around. It's just legendary. It says so much. And there's a place for it in my heart. I'm not even big on that aspect of the tradition. It's just I don't know. It affected me. David, what did you think of the read? And if you have anything to say about this text, I would like to hear it.
The read was excellent. The text is marvelous because it uses a very heavy rhyme scheme, but it doesn't do it in a plodding way because of the pacing and the playfulness of the language. It's not heavy, and it works also because of the high spirit and joy. That it's more like sometimes a heavy rhyme can be plodding, but this is never plodding. It's very well crafted and well balanced.
I agree. The language is enchanting as much as it's mythical. Very, very good stuff. Wonderful idea to choose it. I mean, when it comes to this time of year, I think this is probably the most potent poem, or the one that is most recognizable, and it's high caliber. I mean, there's nothing to complain about. There's nothing plastic about it. It's genuine, So that's wonderful. For our next read, we will read from a portion of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. This is from the chapter, I think it's the first of Three Spirits. I'm not going to read it. It's too long to read the whole thing, but this is another piece of holiday text that I feel is inescapable. I mean, there's so many versions of the movie, first of all. I mean, and they're almost all of them are incredible because the story itself is timeless. And it establishes like so much in today's pop culture. There's so much that's just deathlessly cultural about this. So that all the generations kind of it's a multi-generational thing. Everybody knows this. Especially those who keep Christmas in their hearts, because that's supposed to be the whole fable behind it, So, spoiler alert, old Scrooge is a miser, and he gets visited by three spirits because he's been naughty. And, well, more than three spirits, but there's three spirits bringing him lessons. There's Marley in the beginning, which is, it's kind of a trick question. But in this particular case, he's with the first spirit. It's the ghost of Christmas past. If you have not read this book, do yourself a favor and go get it, especially a wonderful audio book of it. It's wonderful. So we begin, again, we're not going from the beginning of the chapter for time constraints, but we begin when the spirit of the ghost of Christmas past takes him into the past. This is a time traveling story. That's what's so cool about it. He gets projected into the past, and they're standing outside somewhere, which is familiar to him. So it begins. What we're in the middle of this chapter, so this isn't the beginning, but this is where we're beginning because of our time budget. Although they had but that moment left the school behind them, they were now in the busy thoroughfares of a city where shadowy passengers passed and repassed, where shadowy carts and coaches battled for the way, and all the strife and tumult of a real city were. It was made plain enough by the dressing of the shops that here too it was Christmas time again. But it was evening and the streets were lighted up. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked Scrooge if he knew it. "I know it," said Scrooge. "I was apprenticed there." They went in at sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig sitting behind such a high desk that if he had been 2 inches taller, he must have knocked his head against the ceiling. Scrooge cried in great excitement, "Why, it's old Fezziwig. Bless his heart, it's Fezziwig alive again." Old Fezziwig laid down his pen and looked up at the clock, which pointed to the hour of 7. He rubbed his hands, adjusted his capacious waistcoat, laughed all over himself from his shoes to his organ of benevolence, and called out a comfortable, oily, rich, fat, jovial voice, "Yo-ho there, Ebenezer, Dick." Scrooge's former self, now grown a young man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow prentice. "Dick Wilkins, to be sure," said Scrooge to the ghost. "Bless me, yes, there he is. He was very much attached to me, was Dick. Poor Dick, dear, dear." "Yo-ho, my boys," said Fezziwig. "No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas, Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up," cried old Fezziwig with a sharp clap of his hands, "before a man can say Jack Robinson." You wouldn't believe how those two fellows went at it. They charged into the street with the shutters. 1, 2, 3 had them up in their places. 4, 5, 6 barred them and pinned them. 7, 8, 9, and came back before you could have got to 12, panting like racehorses. "Hilly-ho!" cried old Fezziwig, skipping down from the high desk with wonderful agility. "Clear away, my lads, and let's have lots of room here. Hilly-ho, Dick! Cheer up, Ebenezer!" Clear away. There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away or couldn't have cleared away with old Fezziwig looking on. It was done in a minute. Every movable was packed off as if it were dismissed from public life forevermore. The floor was swept and watered. The lamps were trimmed. Fuel was heaped upon the fire. And the warehouse was as snug and warm and dry and bright a ballroom. As you would desire to see upon a winter's night. In came a fiddler with a music book and went up to the lofty desk and made an orchestra of it and turned like 50 stomachs. In came Ms. Fezziwig, one vast substantial smile. In came the 3 Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable. In came the 6 young followers whose hearts they broke. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In came the housemaid and her cousin, the baker. In came the cook with her brother's particular friend, the milkman. In came the boy from over the way, who was suspected of not having board enough from his master, trying to hide himself behind the girl from next door, but one who was proved to have had her ears pulled by her mistress. In they all came, one after another, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly, some pushing, some pulling. In they all came anyhow and everyhow. Away they all went, 20 couples at once, hands half round and back again the other way, down the middle and up again, round and round in various stages of affected coupling, grouping rather. Old top couple always turned up in the wrong place. New top couples started off again as soon as they got there. All top couples at last, and not a bottom one to help them. When his result was brought about, old Fezziwig clapped his hands to stop the dance, cried out, "Well done!" And the fiddler plunged his hot face into a pot of porter, specially provided for that purpose. But scorning rest, upon his reappearance, he instantly began again, though there were no dancers yet, as if the other fiddler had been carried home exhausted on a shutter, and he were a brand new man, resolved to beat him out of sight or perish. There were more dances, and there were forfeits, and more dances, and there was cake, and there was negus, and there was a great piece of cold roast, and there was a great piece of cold boiled, and there were mince pies and plenty of beer. But the great effect of the evening came after the roast and boiled, when the fiddler, an awful dog, mind, sort of man who knew his business better than you or I could have told it him, struck up Sir Roger de Coverley. Then old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig, top couple too, with a good stiff piece of work cut out for them. 3 or 4 and 20 pair of partners, people who were not to be trifled with, people who would dance and had no notion of walking. But if they had been twice as many, 4 times, old Fezziwig would have been a match for them, and so would Mrs. Fezziwig. As to her, she was worthy to be his partner in every sense of the term. If that's not high praise, tell me higher and I'll use it. A positive light appeared to issue from Fezziwig's calves. They shone in every part of the dance like moons. You couldn't have predicted at any given time what would have become of them next. And when old Fezziwig and Mrs. Fezziwig had gone all through the dance, advance and retire, both hands to your partner, bow and curtsy, corkscrew, thread the needle, and back again to your place, Fezziwig cut so deftly that he appeared to wink with his legs, and came upon his feet again without a stagger. When the clock struck 11, this domestic ball broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their stations, one on either side of the door, and shaking hands with every person individually as he or she went out, wished him or her a Merry Christmas. When everyone had retired but the 2 apprentices, they did the same to them, and thus the cheerful voices died away, and the lads were left to their beds, which were under a counter in the back shop. During the whole of this time, Scrooge had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in the scene, and with his former self. He corroborated everything, remembered everything, enjoyed everything, and underwent the strangest agitation. It was not until now, when the bright faces of his former self and Dick were turned from them, that he remembered the ghost and became conscious that it was looking full upon him, while the light upon his head burnt very clear. "A small matter," said the ghost, "to make these silly folks so full of gratitude." "Small?" echoed Scrooge. The spirit signed to him to listen to the 2 apprentices who were pouring out their hearts in praise of Fezziwig. When he had done so, said, "Why, is it not?" He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money, 3 or 4 perhaps. Is that so much that he deserves this praise? It isn't that, said Scrooge, heated by the remark, and speaking unconsciously like his former, not his latter self. It isn't that, Spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in words and looks, in things so slight and insignificant that it is impossible to add and count them up. What then? The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune. He felt the spirit's glance and stopped. What is the matter? Asked the ghost. Nothing particular, said Scrooge. Something, I think. The ghost insisted. No, said Scrooge. No, I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now, that's all. His former self turned down the lamps as he gave utterance to the wish, and Scrooge and the ghost again stood side by side in the open air. My time grows short, observed the spirit. Quick. And that is that. Now, I mean, just like the poem we read before, there is something about this text that is just embedded and imprinted on me early. Like it's such a masterful tale, and it burrows in deep. I think it's facilitated by the Christmas holiday itself, because I used to stay up and watch this movie before I had ever read the book, which I love the book. But I used to watch this movie, of which there are countless adaptations practically, but I watched the black and white one, and I used to stay up waiting for Santa Claus. You know, when you're a young kid, that's the kind of thing you do. And falling asleep to this movie when you're actually waiting for Santa, there's just something about it. It unplugs your unconsciousness. Because when you're a child, you're so ready to believe. And it has a special place in my heart as a consequence of that. But as you can hear, it's also very beautifully written. It's picturesque and timeless. David, what did you think of the read, and how do you fancy this work?
The reading was fine. It's essential. It's part of the Western canon. That's indisputable. It's actually it shapes a lot of what our modern conception of what Christmas is. So if this work didn't exist, Christmas would be very different today.
Yes.
And it's surely, if this were the only text that survived by Dickens, it would be enough to cement his place in the canon. So that's what I think about the work. It's a very important culturally. And, you know, it says a lot about the Christian values and the what we value as what Christians or in the West value about the tradition. And it goes without saying. I mean, I'm not sure that I can add anything to it that would provide any clarification or, I suppose, insight. The spirit of it is in that scene. The enormity of Fezziwig is the enormity of the next spirit that comes, which is the spirit of Christmas present.
That's right. Very good.
Which is about celebration. So it's all a matter of participation in the spectacle, I would say.
That's a keen angle. You lasered in on something very important there. And I have a bit to say on all of this. But that was well put. Um, thing about this story is that it talks about the modern Christmas, even though it's written all the way back when it was written. It is so culturally impactful and has shaped so much because the whole concept of gift giving is an industry. And you have attitudes towards industry. It's either that you want to do it because you love the person, you want to give people gifts because you love them and care, or you want to express generosity. Some people are like that. But it's the very attitude towards mercantilism, specifically when I refer to commercialism and holiday shopping. Because there are parties at the holiday too, so groceries are part of that. And Fezziwig is the anti-humbug. He loves Christmas because it allows him to express his generosity. It gives him an excuse. And he's married. He's not lofty. He dances with all of the workers, his family, everyone who is welcome. And he parties with them and they feast. He feasted them and there was a revel and he celebrated. He gave them that gift, just as Scrooge touches. And it plucks the heartstrings of everyone. It makes you evaluate your nihilism and your materialism. It makes you take stock in things and weigh things out. Like, what is your priorities? I've been through so many golden Christmases in the past. I've been to so many house parties and get-togethers, and the light beamed golden. There was something magical in the air, or could very well be. And it's nice to have expressions of generosity. When you have a good boss, it's wonderful. When you have a bad boss, not so much. But when you have a person who's good and charitable and generous, you go to your company Christmas party and it's not an obligation. You want to be there and you feel welcome. It's certainly a beautiful circumstance to find yourself in. I have had a Fezziwig in my life, and it's of great value. A person who celebrates the end of the year and celebrates Christmas time and knows what that is. It's a beautiful thing. And to have something like that, it's memorable. It's encouraging. It's worth every penny. If you have it, it's nice. It's nice to celebrate. Not everyone has it. Fezziwig did. He knew from his abundance. He knew what to do with the overflow. And they were praising him. And he's a cherished figure in their past. A cherished figure. But that's something to say. Now, departing from the whole concept of writing of the holiday, we could look at the writing like we always do. One of the things we do on the show, we read a poem, we discuss, we read a prose piece and we discuss, and then we seek between the two for the wisdom. David, our resident poet, is usually laser guided with this sort of thing. He provides us with a combination, and it's for us to look into that, to read the tea leaves and see what's going on there. In this instance, it's a holiday theme. Dig it, right? That's simple enough. But one of these is the very spirit of Christmas, as far as, again, the modern tradition. Everybody has different Christmas priorities. Christmas comes from Christ's Mass, and it's, for most people who have an understanding, it's a celebration of the birth of Jesus Christ. But there are other traditions that have arisen from it, and some of them belong to its, because it itself, by the church, it overwrote another holiday, a more pagan holiday, which is where we get the tree and the star and many other things, even Santa himself. Even though he's a Christian saint, There's a lot more in the pagan tradition of what Santa is. But when we look at these texts, one of them lays out the myth of Santa Claus. External. It's the external Christmas. And it's the magical Christmas. It's the Christmas you tell your children in a hushed voice. You tuck them in, and they know that Santa, they know he's going to come. They know he's going to bring presents, and their imaginations are just like a disco ball shimmering, you know? So that's the outer Christmas, the magical Christmas. What is this being, this entity called Santa Claus, who's going to go all around the world bringing presents, or cold, depending on if you're naughty or nice. And he knows that, you know, because he sets up his list, and that's how he knows what to bring. So he must have some sort of clairvoyance. So that's the outer Christmas, right? But the inner Christmas is provided by Dickens. He gives us the heart space of Christmas. So Santa's doing all this work. You know, we're remembering Jesus's birth. But what have you done with your year? And what have you done with your prosperity, if you have any? What is your attitude towards Christmas? And therefore, the real question is, what is your attitude towards other people during Christmas? So there's an outer Christmas with this Santa Claus poem, and then there's an inner Christmas with this Scrooge. And Dickens is challenging you with this myth. Are you Scrooge? Are you a humbug? Or are you Fezziwig? I mean, even Scrooge himself stumbles over his own blindness just for a moment when he realizes he would rather talk to Cratchit at that moment and maybe say a few things, because he had a Fezziwig and Cratchit doesn't. Cratchit has a Scrooge. So the spirits are awesome, the time travel's awesome, but what we have here is we have an inner Christmas, like a snow globe in the center of your being. And what is that snow globe filled with? Dickens makes you ask, you know. There's a reason this text is timeless, because I can remember Christmases where I had this buzzing through my head, all these thoughts, you know. Never had enough abundance where I could ladle out and ladle out. I was never able to be a Fezziwig, but I had Fezziwig in my life. I had several, one in particular. And he made holidays magical with his Christmas party, which is what that is. It's mythologizing the concept of the Christmas party. That's what it is, because it's a timeless thing. And that timeless Christmas party in this text has informed all of our Christmas parties, because again, there's plenty of gray in the world, but this paints it pretty clear. You're a Fezziwig or you're a Scrooge. And Fezziwig is beloved, and Scrooge, well, you know what happens at the end of this book. There's no one but lunatics attending his funeral, looking to parasize over his departure. The grave is cold for him. There's no fondness in his memory. And that's supposed to be the lesson that's being taught. Not materialism. It's not that he didn't want to spend the money. It's that his heart was cold. He didn't have any room in there for anyone. Maybe he was in pain, who knows? But the end of the story reforms him. He gets reconditioned by these spirits and their cosmic persecution upon him. And it's just unbelievable to read. It's unbelievable to have it unfold, to experience it, because those spirits are monumental. They cannot be denied. Each one of them is as potent as the last in a different way. And they all bespeak warning. That's the key. All of them do, even if it's the gentlest kind. And how many of us have Christmas pasts, you know? And sometimes those are beautiful and sometimes they're not. But what we learn here is it's in the attitude. It's not in the season. It's how we treat each other. You know, if we had the spirit of Christmas in our hearts all year long, it would be a merrier world. I don't think that that's false. If we were all cool and celebratory and looked after each other a little bit more, I mean, a lot of people look at it like malarkey, you know, like it's just something to be said. And it's sad when it is just that, that nobody practices it, either because they have nothing to share or because they have nothing to feel. That's why I think it's so powerful. And again, that's what we're focusing on here. An outer Christmas. So the outer manifestation of the myth is the poem, that poem we read. And the inner manifestation of the myth is A Christmas Carol, what Dickens presents. So that's something to remember when you're laying out your own myth and you're writing your stories, you're laying out your narrative. Remember that both have to be expressed. And if you can express both and you could do it even a quarter as good as these two legends have, then you're really going to have something special on your hands. You're going to have you're going to have paper full of words that might contain some transcendence. And that's the key. Art is transcendent. That's true. What we just read is transcendent. It's part of an already powerful mythical architecture that comes out of scripture and has informed all of Western civilization. But this takes it to the next level, and no one can deny it. So do that when you craft your world, when you craft your myth. It's the myth of Christmas. That's what this is, the modern myth. Even though, as I said, they were written when they were written, it's on everybody's hearts. Almost everybody knows these stories. It's not as big as Spider-Man, I think, but it's almost as big as Spider-Man, you know? Maybe in some circles it's as big as Spider-Man, where people wear shirts of it all over the world. People know who they are, like Superman, Batman. People know, like, that's the mythic resonance factor, how you calculate it. Santa Claus is like that. Everybody knows who Santa Claus is. And Scrooge is though a second fiddle, he's still, people know who Scrooge is because he's the counterpart. Santa's like the ultimate Fezziwig. Fezziwig is emulating Santa, you know? But Scrooge, I mean, who is Scrooge? Scrooge is the only thing close is like, I mean, the pre-reformed Scrooge, of course. The Scrooge at the end of the story is transformed. His heart is liberated, and it's like there's scales fall from his eyes. He can recognize his family, he can recognize his employees, and he wants to share. He got it scared into him, you know? I think it's great. David, what do you think about that? All like those points that I brought up concerning this matter.
I think it's an excellent analysis of it. So I agree completely. It's the only thing I would add to it is if you look at it from a dimension of a tradition, it's about an annual celebration. So it's about participating in your society and how your society celebrates its traditions. So to be a member of that society requires that you participate in those traditions. And if you withhold yourself from them, you're not a complete member of the society.
Very good point. That's a very good point. It can be brought to both pieces. We'll start with Scrooge. I mean, what you said is true. He is reclusive, and he is dodgy, and he's unsociable at the very least. I mean, the way he treats his relative when he comes over, he probably would have talked the same way to Marley if Marley wasn't in horrifying disembodiment clanking around his house. Imagine how chill. I mean, that's that whole thing. Ebenezer Scrooge, like the whole concept of that. The rattling of the chains and the sky full of spirits. But he is reclusive, and he is estranged and disconnected from society. There's something about his past that just it never settled right with him, so he just withdrew. I have a comprehension of what that is, I must say. And you do well to mark that, David, because Christmas is a cultural and therefore like participatory thing. You know, people go out and they have to do Christmas. Christmas is something you have to do. And those who don't, you know, they withdraw because they have no business with it. So that is true, and that's a very, very good observation. Santa Claus, it's the opposite. If he doesn't show up, Christmas doesn't happen, according to the myth. Because if he doesn't show, like there's plenty of Christmas movies where it's like something's about to stop Santa and Christmas will be canceled. Goodness gracious, we can't have that, you know? So if Santa doesn't leave the North Pole, then Christmas, the myth of Christmas, according to this, the myth of the passages we've read, it doesn't happen because the stockings won't get stuffed. The presents won't get brought. He won't go on his global ride, his global drop off. And then all the boys and girls will go boo-hoo. So it is a participation. It is a doing thing, a thing you must do. And that's something to remember also when it comes to mythic handles. We're trying to help you out as writers. That's our main goal. We're trying to inspire you. And there's much inspiration that could be taken from texts like this as far as setting up stories. Study the Christmas Carol for the purposes of finding a time-traveling story and outlining a time-traveling story, which is not always easy. It's non-linear storytelling. And it's amazing how it does it back when it does it. Like, that's the thing about it. Yes, about Christmas. Yes, about the language. Ave, no doubt. But what he's done there is just stupendous. I mean, you have these spirits whisking him through time, and you have this moment of temporal flux where he got to decide, do you want to die or do you want to give little Tiny Tim a little bit of bread? You know, do you want to go into damnation with Marley, or do you want to just do the right thing for 10 minutes? You know, it's great. The tension of it, it's building throughout. I mean, there's so much to be learned. And the manifestation of Santa Claus in the poem, again, total magic, total magic. Because that's an entity. That's not a man. That's a thing that's performing magical operations where things are being conducted. And there's things levitating around, and he's distorting his own atomic field, moving through chimneys. And I mean, he's only vaguely human. He's so idealized, you know, everything is all the details are crisp and rigid and standing out. It's incredible. So take all those notes, folks, when you start throwing down mythical entities, and when you start talking about manifesting spirits and dislocations from time in fantasy. This is a great place to go for all that. I've learned much, put it to you that way. And as always, this show flies by faster than Santa and his reindeer. Time flies when you're having fun, when you're reaching into the transcendent. There's a flow of timelessness, and it ain't the Motor Vehicle Commission. You know what I mean, folks? It goes by like that. That's why we have fun doing these, and I feel like we're all trying for something inspirational, trying to see something a different way. This is Joe's Writers Club podcast, JWC Livestream. Sublimated Posey with David and Ricky. Please do me a favor and go over to joeswritersclub.com. Sign up at joeswriters.club and head over to our social media, Facebook, Twitter, etc. And go to our YouTube channel, JWC Livestream on YouTube. Like and subscribe, follow us, spread the word. If you like what we do, if you get something from it, spread the word. Tell your friends, your fellow creatives, because that's really, I think everyone can get something from a show like this. But I think for the creative, it's extra special. And that's who we want. We want to help people who are writers, who are creative obsessors, specifically people who write every day. I try to write every day. So we're always trying to further process, and that's what this is about. I want to thank David Anderson, our resident poet. He has much to do with coming up with this content, and he's greatly valued for it, because it's wonderful. It makes it so easy to do. And it's like I learned stuff. I don't know that I would have put that together without this show, what we came across. So it's worth every penny, just like old Fezziwig. And we thank you for watching. Your viewership is much appreciated. Probably gonna have a few more shows this year, but if not, remember during this holiday, if you could be Fezziwig, be Fezziwig. That's what I always try for. Don't got a lot to make it happen, but try not to be a downer anyway. And we'll see you next time, folks. You guys take care. David, thanks again, man.
You're welcome.